So here we are with classifying data. And again, we go back to qualitative versus quantitative. So favorite movies. So again, these are not numerical quantities, so it's qualitative data. You can't say, so my two favorite movies might be Benjamin Button and The Terminator, right? Which actually they are two of my favorite movies. You can't average those and come up with Driving Miss Daisy or something in the middle. It doesn't make sense. So here, numbers of students in different schools who take Spanish. That's data. That's hard data. That's quantitative. Quantities, right? Quantitative. Football jersey numbers. Yes, it's number, but it's not a numerical measurement. That's still qualitative data, like the most popular football jersey numbers that people wear. You don't average two football players' numbers, come one in the middle. That doesn't make any sense. So again, a reminder here: quantitative, qualitative from your vocab. Alrighty. So determining if something's qualitative or quantitative. Cost of CDs. You can certainly average the cost of CDs and come up with something that's quantitative. Eye color. You can't average blue eyes and I don't know, green eyes and come up with aqua or something. Those are definitely qualitative. Again, they're non-numerical. Alrighty. So back to the idea of univariate and bivariate. So if you have one thing you're measuring, one thing, that's univariate. Measuring two things, that's bivariate. It's kind of straightforward. So here is each set univariate or bivariate. So heights and weights of animals, that's clearly bivariate. You're getting two things about animals, two variables. The cost of internet service from several different providers. You might be looking at 100 providers, but you're still only looking at the cost. So that's univariate, only one variable. Choosing a sample, it says DVD rentals. You want to find out how many DVDs students at your school rent in a month. You interview every 10th teenager you see at a mall. What sampling methods are you using? Is it a good sample? So since you're interviewing every 10th, right, that's your systematic. That's pretty straightforward. Sounds good. But again, it may not be a good sample because it will likely include teenagers who do not attend your school. So if you're only looking for kids at your school, you might get kids that go to another school because we have two more middle schools. So, or in Omaha or wherever, depending on where you're at. Now the got it on this page. You revise your plan and interview all students leaving a school assembly who are wearing the school colors. Will this give you a good sample? Well, at first, oh yeah, all the school colors, it seems kind of like you're randomly picking people, but not necessarily. It says if you are using a stratified sample method, you should choose at random from each group, not just necessarily, people in school colors, right? Or people that have hair, I don't know, whatever. So again, every nth that makes sense. So catching every 10th kid that comes out of the auditorium, and say, hey, asking those questions then. So part of this is determining bias in a survey. It says a reporter wants to find out what kinds of movies are most popular with local residents. The reporter asks, do you prefer exciting action movies or boring documentaries? There is definitely bias in this question because users are exciting and boring. Nobody wants to be boring. Now, I don't know, maybe Mr. Myers, he probably watches boring documentaries because, it's history class. But, whereas I watch exciting action movies. So, but again, bias in that question. For your got it, how can the question be reworded? So you might say something like, do you prefer action movies or documentaries? Again, so trying to take out as much bias as you can. We find, unfortunately, it's kind of a side note, is that bias exists just even without us doing things, like how we ask the questions, who we're asking, all kinds of things create bias anyway. The fact that maybe I was asking it, people are like, I don't want to give you my opinion, I don't care if they lie to me and walk away. So all kinds of things can create bias. So what a good researcher does his or her best to eliminate as much bias as possible, and put a lot of thought into this sort of things. That's where companies like Gallup do really well because they spend a lot of time thinking about bias and how to overcome it. Maybe even sometimes how to use it. I don't know. So a little more discussion of bias, determining bias in a sample. You want to determine what percent of teenagers 14 to 18 watch wrestling on TV. At a high school wrestling match, you ask every third teenager whether he or she watches wrestling on TV. How might this cause bias? Well, you're asking teenagers at a wrestling match about wrestling. So that might be the bias right there. Now, if you go and ask them instead at a dance recital, you might get different results. So 5, you want to know how many of your classmates have cell phones. To determine this, you send every classmate an email asking, do you own a cell phone? How might this have a bias in the survey? Students who have email may be more likely to have a cell phone, maybe. any number of things. So they're more likely to get it quicker, to be able to answer you, especially if you're only collecting for a certain amount of time.